So can you see, you should now have a blue screen in front of you with, unfortunately, my photo on it. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Marvellous.
That's good.
So thanks very much, James. What I'm going to talk about are firstly, some of the sources of finance as we come out of lockdown and as businesses start to recover, hopefully after the pandemic. There'll be some that will be looking to invest in assets, expand their business, try and build their customer base. So this is an observation of some of the potential sources of funding. It's not an exhaustive list, but obviously we have traditional equity, so family and friends or crowdfunding, the high street banks and peer-to-peer lenders for loans, working capital, for example, invoice discounting. There will still be grants available. And of course, there's still some elements of COVID-19 support out there that will need to be considered, not least of which things like the roll-off from the tax deferral that you may have made previously. And also, I know that Sharon will speak later about the recovery loan scheme, but just to highlight that scheme should cover many of the items listed on this slide. So for example, term loans, overdrafts, asset finance, and invoice discounting should all be accessible under the recovery loan scheme, but the details of that haven't been released yet, and they're not due to be until the 6th of April. On the right, and I should say, which source of finance you look to is largely dependent upon the purpose or the reason you're looking to raise it. I guess the most obvious would be working capital, where you might secure finance against an invoice base. Alternatively, asset finance, where you might borrow against the value of an asset or the security that an asset provides. On the right-hand side are some suggestions about where you might look to for information regarding finance. So obviously your bank relationship manager has traditionally been a first port of call. There are firms out there that will do nothing but source finance for you, or identify which sources of finance meet your needs. All areas of the country are covered by a local enterprise partnership. Those are conduits through which government and previously European funding cascaded down into the regions. So it would be worth looking up your local LEP, looking to see what kind of grant programs they have running, and looking to see also what kind of free information, advice and support by way of hand-holding that might be available to help you through the process. Many local authorities now have economic development teams, which are often a good source of information, networking opportunities, but also sources of finance locally, and there may be resources on the local authorities website. And then last but not least, chambers of commerce similarly often will be able to signpost what the sources of grant and financial assistance might be, in particular in the local environment. This next slide shows an idealized process map of how we would go about producing the kind of evidence that you will need to present if you are looking to source finance against any of the most, if not all, of the items listed on the previous slide. So on the left-hand side, we've got the cloud accounting system, typically Xero or QuickBooks, but also there may be other sources from spreadsheets. Now that might be a budget, it might be information that's come from historical sales platforms or online systems. It could be a targeted sales forecast for the year. Both the cloud accounting system data, which is automatically synced, and the manual import goes into, we use a platform called Futrli Advisor. And that allows you, facilitates the production of fully linked profit and loss account, balance sheet, and cash flow forecast, often that you are required to produce when applying for sources of finance. And importantly here, the format that Futrli Advisor produces, it does have in-house reporting and PDF capability, but you can also export to Excel, which is quite useful if you're then trying to stitch that data into an application form or a business plan or an investor deck to be circulated to the people that might be funding you. So what I'm going to do now is show a couple of slides. So this one just shows the granularity in the profit loss account for how you forecast. For example, in this example, you've got shop sales and wedding sales, and the amount of revenue that you expect, or the amount of the value of the sales you expect to make in each of those months is included in the forecast going forwards. Obviously, you can put in expenses and cost of sales too. I haven't expanded them on this slide, but there's complete granularity in what you put into the profit and loss forecast, because it's fully linked with the balance sheet and the cash flow forecast. This highlights the balance sheet. This is an extract from the balance sheet from that forecast. And if you have a look at that line that says loan, in this particular case, we're assuming that in May 21, the business concerned has applied for and been granted a loan of £100,000. Now, if you remember, I said one of the key things that you might like to do with this data once it's produced is to slice and dice it, reformat it, import it into the documents that you will be pulling together as part of the loan application process. The next few slides this is Excel now, so the data's been exported from Futrli Advisor and imported into Excel, and I just happen to have chosen to show the monthly closing bank balance from the scenario that I've run. So these columns now show the value of the bank balance, and because we're looking at 1920 on this slide, these are all actuals. So this has all happened in the past. Now we're looking at a mixture of actuals and forecast. So the actuals are the period to January 21, beyond which we're then looking at forecasts from the business plan. So if you look across to the two columns showing January, everything to the left is actuals, and beyond that is forecast. So if we, and sorry, just before I move on, often those applications for finance will expect you to present 2 or 3 years of historical actual data alongside typically 3 years of forecast predictions. So this is intended to show you how Futrli will enable you to pull 2 years of actuals historically from Xero or from QuickBooks, allowing you to produce a scenario looking forward into the future, and then export both sets of data and reformat them in whatever format you want. This happens to be column chart in Excel. So on this slide now, you remember I said in May 21, the business had secured a £100,000 loan. So now in the closing bank balance, you can see that suddenly the balance has jumped up to £100,000 to reflect the cash that's been received for that loan. And then we then have the year 2022, 23 going forward. So all of that information is then available to be part of the loan application finance. So thank you. That was all I was going to say. I will stop sharing my screen and hand back to James.